All right, welcome to the Erie Music History Podcast. I'm Chip Shell, your host. And today we have our first filmmaker and musician, our first member of the Dogs, and our first person to have their own IMDb page. I didn't notice that. I saw that
Oh
today.
yeah,
Yeah. So, Tom Weber, welcome to the basement.
my own IMDb page where I'm listed as man in bathroom
Two.
number two.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, because there is a man in bathroom number one.
And we're talking about a movie that you did in the
George
76 with John.
Romero's
Yeah.
George Romero's film Martin. It's funny.
Right.
George Romero. I lived in the Highland Park neighborhood in Pittsburgh
Right.
in mid '70s, and I was married at the time.
Okay.
And my ex-wife was looking. We were both film school graduates.
That's what I thought.
She was looking for a job. And somehow she found, or we found, George. And at the time, George was living in Highland Park with his first wife, his son Cameron, who was like a toddler at the time, who's now a film director in his own right.
Yeah.
And anyway, so Joyce happened to go to work on. He had this really low budget film that he was producing at the time, Martin.
And this is post Night of the Living Dead.
This was well after Night of the Living Dead,
right?
When he was filming beer commercials to get by.
Okay.
And I mean, it was really, we're talking really very small, very grassroots. That's another whole.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
that's another whole story. But then the movie got made and the movie came out and Joyce and I split up. George and his ex-wife split up. So for a couple of years, George Romero and I were like newly single drinking buddies. And his office was in downtown Pittsburgh, a few blocks away from where I worked. So
right.
I got to see a little tiny bit of the kind of the inside. And then leading up to the next movie he did was Dawn of the Dead.
Oh, okay.
In Monroeville Mall, which
right.
kind of put him on the map film wise, and he was really off to bigger and better things.
Yeah.
As a way of that. Now, I've had a number of people, and they needed a guy to be like a homeless person living in what we today would call a homeless person living in a bathroom of a train station.
Right.
Where Martin, after committing the first of many very gruesome, he doesn't bite him in the neck. He does it with like a syringe.
Yeah, I fast forwarded through it, but yeah.
I mean, it's still pretty. The bloody scenes in Martin are kind of hard to take. Anyway, but yeah, that was so that was my little cameo role.
But you were,
and it was basically I'm sitting in the stall and there's a camera and George outside. All I can see is the sides of the stall.
Yeah, right.
And George was sort of like reacting to me, getting me to say different things. At one point, for some reason, I had a crayon or something like that. He wanted me to write Howard Hughes on the wall.
Yeah.
For no particular reason. And Howard Hughes, and it was cut. It doesn't appear in the film, so there's no knowing where there was. So that was my kind of momentary contact.
But you were in film school at the time, or you had already been
They called it back at the time. They called it, in a lot of the departments, it was typical. The big state universities had radio, TV, film programs.
Right. Okay.
Right. And I went to Indiana University. This was a master's program, Indiana University in Bloomington.
Yep.
I had always had an interest in documentary filmmaking.
Oh.
And at my first available opportunity, the master's program at Indiana was a way, my parents, being typical middle-class parents of the time, was like, well, that's nothing to make a living at. You need something to fall back on.
Right. And you're an Erie guy?
Yeah, I'm from Erie. I'm from Erie originally. I'm on my father's side about 4 generations back.
All
My
right.
mother was a World War II refugee from Austria.
Oh, okay. Where'd you grow up? Where'd you go to high school?
I went to prep,
Okay. All right. And then
and I won't go into a lot of detail about that, other
no,
than that was not a happy period in my life.
were you playing music at the
But I was
time?
playing in yeah, I was
Okay.
playing in small bands.
So you had already, is it just guitar or do you play multiple instruments?
No, I just played guitar at the time. My
Okay.
background in music was like classical piano lessons
Okay.
when I was a kid.
Oh, right, right.
And at one point, basically the teacher figured out that I wasn't learning to read music. I had a good ear. I could pick up the rudiments of the
Right.
piece from hearing him play it. And I could just kind of hack my way through it on the sheet music. And I was kind of like at that point, I'd kind of had it with
The,
piano
the
lessons.
structured piano
Well, and
lessons.
also, this is like 1963, 64. It's like the
The Beatles are on
Beatles
TV, man. Yeah.
and the Beatles and the Rolling Stones and the Animals and you name it. And then there was just a deluge of those
Right.
bands.
The British
So
invasion.
no,
Yeah.
it's like everybody wanted to play guitar.
Right, right.
So I wanted to play guitar, and my mother was like, "Well, if you take lessons." So I
So,
got a cheap guitar. It was a really awful guitar. And I took lessons from a guy at
oh,
Markham's,
okay.
who I can't even remember his name. But he was like an old time swing orchestra guitar kind of
Right.
guy. He hated rock and roll.
And you're how old?
And I don't know, 12.
Yeah, yeah, you're young anyway. So yeah.
You know, he just hated rock and roll, and he was like trying to teach me all these elaborate jazz chords on this really hard to play. I mean, it looked like Woody Guthrie's
Okay.
guitar.
It's an acoustic.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah. It's
yeah,
thick.
barely.
Yeah, right.
I think it was plywood.
Okay. Yeah.
But anyway, I played a little bit, and I started getting the hang of it. I bought an electric guitar from the Lafayette Electronics catalog,
Oh, okay.
which was something like a Teisco, but a really cheap knockoff of,
Gotcha. All
of a
right.
Teisco,
All right.
Um,
So your first
and
electric.
my first electric, and I played that a little bit, and I had a crappy little amp from, um, uh,
Whatever.
Lafayette or
Yeah.
Woolworths or whatever.
Was it the same thing like with guitar for you that like it was with piano? You picked up on it pretty quick on your own?
Um, I yeah, the thing with guitar was once I got a decent guitar, I eventually got like it wasn't a Fender, but it was like a knockoff
Sure.
of a Strat
Gotcha.
that was playable at least,
Right, right.
and it sounded halfway decent, it played halfway decent. And at that point I just started doing what 90% of my music development was just playing along with
Oh,
records,
right, sure.
sitting in my room, learning,
On
uh,
and off, on and off.
learning to, wearing out records, learning to play the parts. And almost immediately we formed a band.
Oh, really?
Well, I mean, my brother Bill was a drummer,
Oh, okay.
and he had gone through the same kind of thing. They hated the idea of him playing drums, but if he took lessons, and Bill luckily landed with Flip Bellotti as his drum teacher.
Good. Yeah.
Flip was just a legendary guy in Erie
Right.
jazz circles, and really funny guy, almost a stand-up comic kind of guy. So
Right.
Bill had some very good drum lessons and drum experiences. And the third guy was a guy, Scott Uraro, who was
Okay.
a mutual friend of both of ours, who years later was the founding member of the band Hit and Run,
Right. Right. Gotcha. I
and
knew his name. Yeah.
died at a very relatively young. I mean, in his
Right.
30s, I think.
So how old are you forming this band?
13,
Oh, so you
14,
got right into it.
15,
Yeah. All right.
Yeah, I mean, all of us, we kind of didn't know much about playing hard. All I knew was like the cowboy
Oh, I
chords,
was gonna say, what are you
the
playing?
chords that are in the Mel Bay How to Play Guitar book,
Gotcha.
first position G, first position. Then I learned the magic chords E and A, and my career in rock and roll, because I learned they were right beside each other on the neck,
Yeah.
and you could just kind of flop your hand over and play, and you could slide up the neck. You could go up the neck, and you didn't even have to bar the chord. You could do it with your thumb.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I devised just a very sloppy way of playing guitar. And the thing was, I wanted to get out there and play in front of, you know, I mean, this was private
Is
parties
that what it was? Yeah.
and middle school
YMCA or
dances.
anything like that, or no YCO stuff?
Nothing even as high up the food
Yeah.
chain
Right.
as Wyco.
Okay.
But we were a band,
Yeah. Yeah.
and then in high school I got in with a different group of guys who were really a band, and they needed a rhythm guitar player, so I became the rhythm guitar player in this kind of.
What
It was almost like a Beatles
What was that
cover
band?
band. I can't remember.
No. Okay.
We had various names. We were Hudson's Individual at one time.
All right.
Well, this was in the era of. Also, I got to keep refreshing. This was in the era of the Chocolate Watch Band. The
The
Strawberry
Strawberry
Alarm
Alarm
Clock,
Clock. The weird names.
the
Yeah. Right.
the weird psychedelic band names and all that kind of
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
Um,
So you keep playing with them in high school?
well, this was kind of this was kind of on and off, and then some of us got together with other people, and the band kind of morphed in various different
Okay.
directions. So I had my kind of prep band that we would play we played at a few like dances and prep variety show,
Yeah. Yeah.
um, and
And you're just rhythm.
and yeah, I'm rhythm guitar,
Okay.
and Billy Peters was the lead guitar player. Kenny Wright was the bass player. Kenny lived right around the corner from me and was kind of my influential music buddy. He was a bass player.
Okay. All right.
And I remember one time when Beatles' Rubber Soul had just come out, that we went down to like Grant's or Kresge's or someplace
Yeah.
downtown that had the cheapest records. We bought a copy of Rubber Soul that was ours jointly. Eventually, I think I
And
bought my own or he
shared
bought his
it.
own. Um, and we went to his house and basically we sat down and kind of listened to side one, flipped it over, flipped it back over, and started learning the songs.
Wow.
You know,
Yeah.
just because, and I don't know, that was a difficult bunch of Beatles
I know
songs
that's some eclectic stuff.
to get into. But that was the kind of sound that I was into, was the kind of
Hmm.
jangly, the Birds. I
Yeah.
loved the Birds. The Birds were almost bigger than the Beatles in my,
Interesting.
in my world. Well, it was like the California thing was
Right.
completely different from the East Coast. There were a lot of musical influences happening. The
Right.
main thing, of course, in the media was all the bands from England.
Right. Right.
And Erie being Erie, all these bands from England, I remember buying Fresh Cream by Cream
Yeah.
2 weeks after it came out for 99 cents in the bargain bin,
Yeah.
because just
Nobody was listening.
nobody was nobody was buying that
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, Erie's it's a thing consistently over the years. Erie's taste has always been very kind of middle of the road, very
Sure.
influenced by what's on the radio.
So you play in that band for a while, and then what happens? Early 70s. You
Well,
moved?
now I graduated high school in '68,
Okay.
and
All
I
right.
went up to Boston for college.
Oh, okay.
And I mean, take a sheltered Catholic school kid from Erie, Pennsylvania, and put him in the midst of Boston in 1968. I mean, my head didn't stop spinning for, I
Lots of
went,
music,
great,
lots
my
of stuff
parents
going
aren't
on.
around, I can go.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, my first year of college or two, I didn't do very well as a student,
Gotcha.
but I saw Jeff Beck. I saw the Jeff Beck group with Ronnie Wood
Yeah.
and Rod Stewart.
Right.
I saw the first show the Faces did in America
Wow.
as the Faces.
Wow.
I saw the first or second time the Who played Tommy in its entirety, and
Cool.
this was in a 300 capacity club
Oh, wow.
where I mean I could reach out and untie Pete Townsend's shoelace from where I was standing. So it was a very intimate, and I just remember those English bands being louder than anything I'd ever heard in
Right.
my
Right.
life. They all had great big, they had the Marshall
Sure.
amps and the
Sure.
high watt amps and all that kind of stuff.
So you're checking out some of the greatest classic rock bands when they're first out in
I
Boston.
got me a job there was another place that came and went very rapidly called the Psychedelic Supermarket.
All right.
And
Love the
I
name.
and I worked for that guy anything from putting up flyers to handing out flyers on street corners to I was kind of a roadie for the bands occasionally.
Okay.
uh, I got to carry the Moody Blues equipment. I got
Cool.
to carry one end of Sly Stone's organ that you see in the Summer of Soul movie.
Okay. Yeah.
So it was a real. I mean, my eyes were for an Erie kid,
Yeah.
where Erie had a very respectable music scene, and a lot of people made a living at music. There was a lot of, I mean, all levels of music
Yeah.
from when I was growing up. Swing was still kind of in there.
Oh.
Dance bands like Jimmy Minucci's Tune Toppers, those kinds of bands were. Buddy Russell had a band, and Flip Bellotti had a band, and
Right.
so this was Mario Bagnoni was a big
That's
deal
right. He was a musician. Yeah.
on the Erie music.
Trumpet player.
No, guitar
Oh,
player,
guitar player. That's right.
guitar player.
Yeah. Big guy in the union too.
Yeah,
Yeah. Are you playing guitar in Boston at all?
I shipped a guitar and amp up to Boston with me, and I was playing occasionally, but I didn't get anything really regular going
Okay.
in Boston. Now, I mean, it was a crazy time around Boston too. It's like uh, Jerry Harrison of the Modern Lovers, later of
Talking
Talking Heads.
Heads.
Jerry Harrison and Jonathan Richman lived like the next dorm over
Hmm.
from me. And I remember Jerry Harrison I mean, I could close my eyes and picture Jerry Harrison as an 18-year-old.
Yeah.
And, so there was stuff around, and, I jammed with various bands, but Boston was a serious enough market that there weren't, I mean, I'm sure out in the suburbs where there were bands like ours that were little high school kid bands that were playing high school kid
Right.
events.
Right.
But, in general, the music scene in Boston was so grown up and so serious that there was never any really question of access to those people as
Right.
players.
So that must
I
have
mean, Van
influenced.
Morrison was living in Boston at the time. You'd see him at in the bars
Right.
and that sort of. So it was a very active scene. My favorite bar band to go and see was called the J. Giles Blues Band.
Okay. Yeah.
And they were a jump blues, they were them, but years before they became,
Peter Wolf's with them at the time.
Oh
Or?
yeah,
Okay.
it was the guys
Magic
that
Dick.
that
Everybody's there.
it was the
Yeah.
guys
Cool.
who went on to be the to be the J
Right.
Giles, um, the big touring act. So, to me, musically, it's more like I wasn't playing up there, but I was having my eyes open
Yeah.
every day by something.
Would you go there to study?
I went to Harvard,
Oh,
okay?
okay.
And I went to Harvard primarily because my dad went to Harvard.
And your dad was
I
a
mean,
judge, right?
my dad was a judge,
Yeah.
and a very kind of influential person around Erie, and it was just a foregone conclusion
You're going to be a lawyer.
that I'm going to be a lawyer and follow in my dad's footsteps and all this kind of stuff. And a lot of my early adulthood was a delicate balance between like doing what my parents wanted me to do and doing what I wanted to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
As I look back and as I can see, the one really consistent thread in my life
Music.
has been music.
Yeah. Yeah.
Every middle class kid I know that played in bands went through that same thing
Sure.
with their, oh, if music is fine, but you need something to fall back on.
Right. Right. For you, it was going to
Uh,
be law, but didn't
yeah,
work out.
what I settled on because I had worked a couple of summers at the Erie Times. So I decided I'd go in that direction. I was a
Just
cub
a beat
reporter
reporter.
at the
Yeah.
Times.
Right. Yeah.
But anyway, so that was my pattern. I came back to Erie because I loved working at the newspaper, and this was way better experience than working on a school newspaper would be. Yeah, that was what I was going to do. But then my senior year at Harvard, somebody put a video camera in my hand. But immediately, I saw the potential in combining my interest in reporting with visual media.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's kind of like, well, I'm going to go to school for documentary filmmaking.
So then somehow you migrate back to Pittsburgh. You're hanging out with George Romero.
Well,
You're married.
my
Then
deal, I got married to my Bloomington girlfriend,
okay.
and we said we're going to live wherever the first one of us gets a job. And I got a job with print media in Pittsburgh,
Okay. All right.
news service.
Writing.
So I kind of went writing
Yeah.
news features and whatever.
Cool. All right.
And my wife, Joyce, didn't know a lot of people in Pittsburgh, and she was a Chicago girl, and she really wanted to go back to Chicago. So we split up somewhat amicably, and I stayed in Pittsburgh.
Okay.
But then, kind of in the second part of my living in Pittsburgh, and this is only for like a 4-year period, I met George Romero,
Right.
and what was happening in Pittsburgh was there was a whole local scene starting up for the first time
A film.
of people, well, of bands,
Oh, of bands. Okay. Gotcha.
of
All
people
right.
playing their own music.
Yeah.
And this was like 76, 77. The punk thing was happening everywhere.
Yeah.
And in Pittsburgh, there was, the Iron City House Rockers were just getting started.
Right.
Donnie Iris had been there all along,
Right.
but Donnie Iris had already been a rock star
The
with
Jaggers.
the Jaggers.
Right.
And, he wasn't really doing much of anything until actually kind of later.
Right.
A band called Diamond Rio.
Right. Okay.
And Norman Nardini was the bass player.
Oh, okay.
And Norman went off and
Did the
Norman
Tigers.
went off and did the type. But anyway, all these bands were just happening just as I was leaving. I moved back to Erie because I was offered a job at QLN,
Oh,
TV
okay.
and radio.
Oh,
They were starting a news operation, and they wanted somebody with my qualifications to be like an outside reporter.
yeah. Okay.
And also during that period of time, a place opened on 9th Street, Molly B's.
Right.
The thing about Molly B's is they were bringing in Leslie West and Mountain. They were bringing in Joan Jett played at Molly B's.
Okay.
Cyndi Lauper in her band Blue Angel
That's
played at
right.
Molly B's. For a while, the bar was called Lord Bethwick.
Oh, okay. I was going to
And
ask you. Yeah.
then they added on, I think they added space on to Lord Bethwick because Molly B's, when you came in, always kind of had the look of it was two different places that were
Gotcha.
that were
Gotcha.
kind of pieced together. The entryway was very strange. Anyway, Molly B's just always has a significant place to me, mainly because it's the first place I saw the Plimsolls.
And so you come back. People who know you in this town musically think of you as someone with the dogs, obviously.
Yeah, I haven't
And
even gotten to that.
right, but we got to be getting close, right? I mean,
Well,
it's
this period of time, 79, 80.
okay.
What was happening, what got me started, I bought one of the first 4-track cassette Porta
Oh,
Studios.
okay.
There was other people around, but
Yeah.
I was like running around. What I had a portable studio in a road case,
Yeah.
and I was running around recording bands like in their rehearsal spaces,
Just
in
for
their
fun.
houses. No, I mean, I was getting a little bit of money
Oh,
for
okay.
it.
All right.
The bands, like I recorded the first recording of the Wiggling
Perfect.
Judies.
Yep.
But anyway, the Porta Studio led me to, I had already known Jack from way back. And also, Jack played in The Frenchman with Jack Bernard.
Jack Bernard. Okay.
Jack
Okay.
Bernard,
Good.
Vic Vinyl,
Yep.
Dean
Gotcha.
Gleason,
All right.
man of many
Y-
stage names.
Right. Right.
Anyway,
I was gonna say Dean had commented that the dogs had more members than anybody over the years, and
well, I mean, the dogs were already a going concern, but yeah,
at the time,
with a very revolving door
yeah.
of members. I remember there was a version of the dogs called the Unlisted that Paul Tatera was in. I
Uh-huh.
don't know if you
I know the
remember
name. Yeah.
him.
Yeah.
Anyway,
So you're
but
running around
basically,
town recording.
the planets lined up to where the dogs had a free night. My parents were out of town. My parents' basement in Glenwood, which was the rehearsal room for a lot of different rock bands. So I got the dogs in my parents' basement and recorded them Easter weekend, 1982.
Okay.
And
Right.
after that, they could use. I went to see them live. I felt they could use some help in the live sound area.
Had you been going to see them before you recorded them?
Yeah, yeah. Oh yeah. I mean,
Okay.
I
So
remember going to lots of dogs gigs.
right.
I mean, I became sucked into the dogs kind of through the
And
audience.
where were they playing at that time? You said
Modern Music Mondays were,
was it Oliver's or that wasn't there
okay,
then?
the places where the kind of modern music
Yeah.
scene really emerged from were Sherlock's
Yep.
and MJ's on
MJ's.
26th Street, which was the winery before.
Right.
Now it's an antique.
Antique store.
Now
Right.
it's the Walker House
You're correct. Right.
Antiques.
Right. So they were
They
playing
were the
around.
places having the Monday night. And what they'd have is like quarter drafts and a free hot dog or whatever. And there were all of these punk bands in Erie. So, I mean, they would have like 4 bands
Well, that's what I was
on
going to
Monday
say.
night.
Yeah.
And Sherlock's would have a different 4 bands.
So they were
And people
playing.
would buzz back and forth between them.
Would they play like an hour set or something like that?
Yeah, people were playing. Most of the bands only knew an hour.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Yeah.
Only had an hour set. So I was friends with the dogs,
Yep.
and I was helping them out with doing live sound for them.
Okay.
And then one night there
Acts.
was a frat party that got busted in
Right.
Edinburgh, and Jeff, the guitar player
Jeff
who had
Just.
been downing pills, and drinking heavily all night,
Right.
hit a utility pole at a high speed.
Right.
I remember the next morning getting a call from Bruce.
Yeah.
And they they had gigs, they wanted to continue whatever. They didn't originally. It was like, we don't know how bad Jeff is. Can you fill in for him? And I pretty much already had recorded them. I knew a lot of the
Gotcha.
songs.
Right.
I knew enough songs. They needed to. There was an opening gig, opening for the Young Swingers.
Okay.
Bernie White, Bill Cotter,
Yeah.
who were still Chicago based at that time, and they came back to Erie to do like a 4th of July weekend. So, I mean, I remember I had maybe 3 weeks
Oh,
to
okay.
fit in with the Dogs enough to play a set
So
with
you
them.
haven't played in a band since you were at
I
prep, or
hadn't
no,
played.
in
I
Indiana,
hadn't
you were in
played
bluegrass.
really. I mean, I hadn't played really in a band in an organized band at
Yeah.
that point in a long time.
Right. Right.
I kept playing, but I was like
Yeah.
a bedroom guitar player.
So you're playing during this time, and
Yeah, yeah.
so,
You know,
but now it's the pressure's on.
I had been playing, practicing, not in bands, you know, but I'd kept my skills up to a point.
Yeah.
Now the Dogs at the time was Jack Bernard and me
And Bruce.
and Bruce Lentz and
And
Bill Nicholas.
okay. All right.
Bruce Lentz and Bill Nicholas were both kind of Edinburgh College dropouts who were living on the fringes of the college in
So that's why you
Edinburgh.
guys played in Edinburgh so much.
And well, originally the only place that would hire us was the Halftime Bar in Edinburgh,
Oh, okay.
which went through a bunch of permutations. It was the Copper Coin. Now it's Fat Willie's, or maybe it isn't even Fat
Okay.
Willie's anymore.
But the
Anyways,
Evergreen eventually came later then.
yeah, we didn't play at the Evergreens at first. I mean,
Oh,
what Jack did, Jack booked us into the halftime on a big football weekend, and we just packed out the halftime to a scary level.
yeah.
And you know, word got around that we had done that. So I mean, the halftime just basically hired us for every football weekend.
Gotcha.
You know, and with that we started. Now, none of the places in Erie were. I mean, Sherlock's. We were kind of like too punk
Oh, okay.
for. We weren't really punk, but we
Right.
were too punk for Erie. Sherlock's was kind of into a folky, jazzy
Oh,
kind of scene at the time,
hmm.
and not so much. I mean, Sherlock's changed a lot over the years.
Yeah.
So Sherlock's was really into more. They did not have the big house PA at the time.
Oh, okay.
I mean, any of the times we played there, they did not have the big stage and the big house PA.
Did you bring your own?
Yeah, we carried
Oh,
the Dogs always carried PA. No, what we were doing, we were playing the halftime almost exclusively. Oliver's was the first Erie place,
right.
and Oliver's had kind of just opened
And we're talking on French by the
on
Civic Center.
yeah, seventh and French.
Right.
It's
Yep.
the like the glass block fronted
Yep. Yep.
um,
I remember.
place. Anyway, that was a predecessor of the Docksider
Oh, really?
because Bob Nelson was a part owner of Oliver's, and then he sold his share and
And went.
started the
Oh,
Docksider
okay.
at 420 State Street.
Gotcha. Okay.
Now, so after, I mean, it didn't take that long that we were drawing these record crowds. We were a really popular band, you know.
Yep.
Well, because the Dogs, the thing was, Bruce is very entertaining.
Absolutely.
The Dogs was like the circus was in town. You know, people would come to see the circus.
Right. Right. Yeah.
You know, I mean, they didn't know if we were gonna, what we were gonna do exactly.
Sure.
And Bruce was always very entertaining, and it was a high energy band. Bill was a fabulous bass player.
Okay.
I mean, Bill was like no kidding, like a Jaco Pastorius level
Wow.
bass player.
Okay.
I mean, Bill could play better not paying attention
Yeah.
than anybody else. And Bill and I, because of it was the Who format, it was a three piece with a lead singer.
Right.
everybody has to cover a lot of ground in a band like that.
Yeah.
So Bill and I kind of developed a way of playing together because I've always been a much more rhythm guitar kind
Right.
of
That's what I wondered.
player.
Now you're the only guy.
I've always, I learned to play lead guitar.
Okay.
I've never been really happy with guitar solo. It was like, to me, there's just a fine line between like good guitar soloing and shredding,
Sure.
wheedly, endless stuff that
Well,
doesn't make any sense.
what kind of guitar were you playing back then?
I was playing a Hamer guitar like Rick
Very
Nielsen's,
80s.
and it was well, and it just wasn't working with the sound of the band.
Hmm.
And Marty O'Connor was selling a Strat, and I tried it out. He lent it to me once to try out at practice, and I loved it. Just cut through the mix, and it just sounded perfect.
Yeah.
So I was playing a Strat.
Okay.
I can tell you, I was playing a Strat through a tube Echoplex into a Fender amp, Pro
Okay.
Reverb, Twin Reverb, something like Pro Reverb.
All right. Yeah.
And that was a bigger amp than I used in later years. And the PA we had belonged to some other band. I mean, we had two. We had a power rack that weighed 2,000 pounds.
Sure. Yeah. Back then, yeah,
We
you
had
hated
like
to
a
be the sound
homemade
man.
rack
Right.
made from inch
Yeah.
plywood that weighed 300 pounds by itself, and fill that with big power amps.
Giant horns
Well,
and
we had
subs.
big giant EV
Right.
horns, and I think they're called Perkins cabinets.
Okay.
They're like a certain design 15 cabinet.
Yeah.
And we carried that all over Hell and Gone. Well, the thing was, Jack had previously been in a road band, the Living Dead band.
Okay.
So Jack had still some contacts in, downstate, in like, you know, uh, Chambersburg, Gettysburg State College,
Okay.
Johnstown area, So I mean, the Four Piece Dogs, when I first joined, I wasn't working anywhere at the time. QLN had blown up
Oh, okay.
with the early days of the Reagan administration. The Dogs was like my livelihood.
Wow.
For a while, Jack was the only one in the Dogs that had a job.
So you guys were started traveling.
So we traveled. I mean, we never traveled a lot, but we did a lot of we did
Yeah.
a lot of weekend gigs. But as the '80s progressed, more and more and more places started opening up to having live music
Right.
because they'd be empty on Friday night, and down the street would be like obscenely
Right.
packed. So we managed to kind of work that, but we were playing in the early days, 82, 83. We were playing, I'm going to say, every Friday and Saturday, most Sundays, and sometimes a Monday or a Wednesday, or even a Monday and a Wednesday
Right. Right.
in one week, because there were just a lot of these gigs.
Were they all one nights or
Um, uh, when we started playing the Greens was always a Friday and
cool?
Saturday.
Okay. Right.
So once we kind of tried out and passed the test at the Greens,
Yeah.
and that I felt that was really our kind of home base.
Right. Right.
That was the place I felt was the most comfortable to play in, and of the memorable shows that we did, most of them were at the Greens.
That's what I was going to ask you. What was your favorite place and where was it?
Yeah, I
Did you
mean, the
feel
Greens
comfortable?
was just
Why? You just something about it?
because the Greens was like being in a bar in Mississippi
In
or
the woods.
something.
Yeah.
I mean, it was
Tell
surrounded by trees. It
tell
was a
people where it
big
was.
old place. Well, Route 99, south of Edinburgh.
Right.
You can kind of see the spot if you know where to look
Right.
now.
There's a chimney there.
And I
That's
mean,
about
it
it.
was a giant old, what it had been in the days of inner city trolley lines. it had been a hotel.
Oh, okay.
And you could walk out into the field, or you could at the time, the field on the east side of 99, and you could find remnants of, you know, rails and ties and
Gotcha.
stuff kind of half buried in the ground.
Cool.
So the Evergreens was like, and they had room. They had rooms that you could rent, and
Oh,
there
okay.
were people living there. You know, there were these kind of like down and out redneck kind of guys who lived in rooms at the Evergreens. It was family run at the time. It was family run at the time, and the parents lived upstairs and sort of ran the place, owned the place, and Sam and Hope, the brother and sister, ran the. I don't remember
Okay.
their
Yeah.
last names, but
Yeah.
anyway, they
Uh,
ran the place, and they were just very friendly to. Well, we packed their place,
you did.
night
Okay.
after night after night. Sometimes we would, if we had done a weekend somewhere else, there was a Sunday night gig
Hmm.
that mostly Marty O'Connor, Frederick Martin Band. After Frederick Martin Band, I forget what it was. It was Jabberwocky
Okay.
for a while. They were kind of pretty much the steady Sunday night
They were
band
a
up
cover
there.
band, right? Or what?
Yeah, they were more of a cover band than the Dogs were,
Right.
but the emphasis in that band again was on they had some really great players in that band.
Sure.
Anyway, it just became a thing.
Well, go back to what you just said about the dogs were. I thought you guys only played your own stuff. Were you mixing in
No,
some
we
covers?
played sort of distorted covers
Okay.
of. We didn't play anything exactly like. Yeah, I
Like you
mean,
expected to hear. Sure. You made your
to
own.
get people in the early days, particularly, we played Gloria, we played Sweet Jane, we
Gotcha.
played Should
Yeah.
I Stay or Should I Go by the Clash,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
we played Heard It Through the Grapevine,
Did you always
but
do
we
that?
always played just mutant versions
Sure.
of
Right.
those songs. We would never, the rule was we would never listen to the original, and we would just kind of concoct a version of a song. And mainly it was just in the early days while we needed to build our repertoire of original stuff, it was to get people to dance.
Gotcha.
And
Right.
it was
Right.
to fill up, I mean, the days of this is almost ancient history now, the days of the 3 or 4 sets a night,
Right. That's
playing 10 to 2.
that's what I was going to ask you. 4 sets, 3 sets,
Um,
varied.
it was 4 hours, it was 10 to 2.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow, it'd be like 10:30 to and at the greens we would always go after two.
Oh,
We
you
we
would.
usually went to 2:15, 2:20, 2:30.
And you're mixing those
Um,
covers and originals in, right? It's not like our
yeah,
first set's all covers and
no, no,
okay,
no. I mean, it was a mix of stuff,
okay,
and very quickly our own. I mean, very quickly we had enough of our own stuff. During the later days, we were hardly playing covers
that's
at
what I thought.
all.
Yeah,
You
right.
know, once you build up a repertoire, and it's like songs that people come to the gig to hear.
Sure, right. Yeah, you developed a
We
following.
developed a
Yeah,
following for our own music and our own songs, which the one thing I'm really proud of with that band is that I think we took the original band thing in Erie about as far as it can be taken.
and so you record a number of cassettes. I know Psycho Daddy, Apocalypse Howl. How many other ones were there?
Apocalypse Howl was recorded at the Evergreens in '85,
Oh, okay,
and it was one of our. I was working at the newspaper again
okay,
at the time, and I had a job. I was the courthouse reporter. I had a beat with a lot of responsibility. I kind of took a vacation from the
right.
Dogs
I knew you had left for a little
for
while.
a while, and yeah, Apocalypse Howl was like our last gig
Oh, okay,
for a while,
okay.
you know. But I mean, the Dogs. If you talk to Jack, the Dogs like broke up and reformed and played for the last time
Yeah.
a lot of times.
I have a list here that somebody put on Facebook. Yeah, and you're right. I mean, it's 80
Oh,
to 82, 83. Then the band breaks up in 85, and then Bill leaves, and Kevin Bensick takes his place, and Kevin, off and
well,
on,
you
off and
know,
on, and
it was a thing about the Dogs. It was a very volatile combination of personalities
okay,
in that band, and there was a lot of tension in that band. Not that we would have fist fights on stage, but there was a lot of sort of creative tension because everybody really cared a lot about the band and the materials, and I mean, we Jack and I clashed many times over the years.
well,
you
who?
know we Sam Hyman,
I
if
mean,
you ask Sam Hyman had a nickname for us. He called us the Hammer Brothers
okay,
because we were always like hammering. More or less, I had more to do with the creative side,
that's what I was going to
and
ask.
Jack had more to do with the business side.
So when you say creative, you're writing with Bruce. Who's doing the majority of it?
We're all arranging
Okay.
songs. What I meant was on the production end.
Well, I was going to
Is
ask.
like gradually over the course of gradually now Apocalypse Howl was recorded at the Greens by Keith Pacheco and John Mazza
Gotcha.
and mixed at their studio.
Right.
Psycho Daddy, we went to a guy in Pittsburgh, Dave Ernie, that the Spuds had
Okay.
recommended.
Gotcha.
And we Psycho Daddy, that was the cassette era. We
Right.
couldn't afford CD, so we opted to do Psycho Daddy on cassette. So about now this is jumping ahead a little bit, but around 89, 90, we had broken up for a while
Okay.
with Apocalypse Howl. We got back together. There was various offshoots and different things with different people.
Right. Right.
We got back together in 86, and I had a room at Raven Sound at the time, a rehearsal room.
The one we talked about.
Right, that
Okay.
we
Right.
right, and so the Dogs kind of moved in and had our weekly. We started up again.
Okay.
Only Bill was long gone.
Right.
We had Kevin Bensick for a while as a bass player,
Right.
and somehow Sam Hyman and Kevin McCleary entered the picture at
Yeah. I
this
was gonna say
point
the band got bigger.
in 80. Well, yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, Sam was really a kid at
Right.
the time. Sam was just so gifted
Right.
that we just had to have him. I mean, we could do so much more as a band with Sam.
Right. Right.
And Kevin, added a whole kind of New York, New Jersey, East Coast saxophone. You didn't see a lot of saxophone
Yeah.
players in bands around here.
So Kevin Bensick's playing bass now,
Kevin Bensick's
and
playing bass,
and
but before we even got to the studio, Kevin Bensick decided that this band wasn't going to make enough money to please him.
so that's how Bruce came.
And Bruce Hunt
Gotcha.
became the bass player.
Yep.
So anyway, we got together in a period of maybe a few weeks to a month. We wrote the songs that became Psycho Daddy.
Okay.
And those were pretty fresh when we went to Pittsburgh to record.
Okay.
Those songs hadn't been kicking around. We played them out. We played all of the songs out to tighten them up.
Yeah.
That was kind of a rule of ours, was that we really wanted to do that. We didn't want to do this Rolling Stones kind of, play it 50 times in the studio, and the first one that gels is the one that goes on the record.
Gotcha. Right.
We were kind of like, because he was charging us an hourly rate, and I was pretty much the one paying.
Because you had a job.
Well, yeah, I had a good paying job
Yeah.
at the time. But anyway, I mean, we spent $4,000, $4,500 on studio time making the whole thing in
That's
Pittsburgh.
that's real money in 1989,
Well, but we
88.
were working all the time,
Yeah,
so I mean, we were able to pay a lot
cool.
of that with gigs.
Right.
And then the album after that, "Riot in My Head," that
Okay.
was only about a year. We did it to ourselves. You hear this record companies all the time. It's like, oh, we had our whole lives to write our first album, and we had 9 months to write our second
Yeah.
album. It was kind of like that with us. We had some momentum. Indie rock in the mid late 80s, like that, 87, 88, 89. This was leading into the grunge
Oh,
thing.
right.
So DIY rock bands were a really big thing all over the United
Yeah,
States at
yeah.
the time. And I mean, there were a lot of them. There were DIY rock bands in every city. um,
Well, take a drink. You need a drink after
yeah.
all this. Yeah. So you've covered a lot of the evolution of the band. You're in the late 80s now. You guys are sporadic. You just released the other album. Were there any other albums after that one?
There was "Riot in My Head,"
Yeah.
which was again completely produced in Pittsburgh. And now we went back to that album. We went back and revived a couple of songs. Um, we revived a couple of covers that we had been playing
Oh,
out. So "Slow Down," the Beatles song,
yeah.
is on "Riot in My Head."
Okay.
And the song "Riot in My Head" is basically a riff-based country song that Bruce made up some, funny lyrics to.
Right.
Um, so that was a little bit looser. That was more a little bit like Psycho Daddy. We were trying to make our big artistic
Gotcha.
statement
All
with
right.
Psycho Daddy. "Right in My Head" was a little looser. Then we did another album, uh, half part with Dave, and by this time my studio was up and running
Yeah.
here. So, but I didn't have a very big room. So what we did for the fourth and final album was called Board 92, but it came out in 93.
Okay. All right.
Anyway, and that was one where we recorded one side with Dave Ernie in Pittsburgh,
Okay.
but pretty much a hit and run kind of session where we just laid down the tracks and mixed, and everything was over and done with in a very short period of time.
Yeah.
And I remember I traded Dave Ernie a Telecaster for the studio time.
Wow.
And the other half, we tracked at Keith's,
Okay.
which was in Raven by
Right.
this
So
time. They
it's
had the big room.
right next door.
We had the nice big room for tracking, and I mixed it
Oh, cool.
at my own
All
studio,
right.
and that actually led me, about 93, 94 on. The scene started cooling off.
That's what I wondered. Yeah.
The scene started cooling off. DUI roadblocks were starting to come in.
Yeah.
A lot of the factors that um, that limited audiences for bands at the time. So we kind of decided around 94 or so, we kind of decided that we would play 4 or 5 times a year.
Okay.
And if we played 4 or 5 times a year and not more, we could get 300 people to come out each time we played,
Right. Right.
you know. And the really ridiculous big dogs crowds at Goofy's that
Yeah.
we had, that was in the later days.
Right.
And that was people were going to see. By that time, we were a known commodity. People were going to see, come
The
to see
show.
us,
Yeah. Right.
come to see the monkey act. Yeah.
So you mentioned so you're near the end, or maybe you are at the end of the Dogs, and you start your own studio. What was that? What
Uh,
was that called?
I had a, I didn't, it was called Mr. Dub for a
Okay,
while, Mr. Dub, and I still use Mr. Dub as a password occasionally, you know.
but you
Uh,
record My Three Scum there. You record the Go Go
it
Rays, the
was
Shrugs.
I moved in 91. I moved to a split ranch house on a kind of an odd lot with no neighbors up by the
Perfect.
reservoir, up by the Arlington Reservoir in
Yeah,
like South Erie near Glenwood,
yeah,
And because of this, and I had a family room that was like 3/4 underground and a 2-car garage,
yeah.
so that became the studio.
Cool.
And I had a half-inch 16 track that I had bought from Keith,
Yeah.
and a Mackie 32/8 board, which was the state of the
Back
art kind
then,
of thing
for sure.
back then.
Yeah.
It was in a big family room, and there was a bathroom and a closet in the family room. So those were the like isolation. I put this stuff
Yeah, right. The
in them,
foam all
and
over.
those
Yeah.
became the isolation cabinets for amps.
Gotcha.
And I had a laundry room in the back of the basement. So if we needed a bass amp with isolation, we could use the
Right.
laundry room. The drums were just I put them right. I just moved the cars out and
Right in the
set the
garage.
drums, rolled out on carpet. I had a carpet rolled up on
The ceiling.
hooks, up on the ceiling. I
Sure.
just bring that down, roll it out, and
Hmm.
run my snake. And yeah, I
You
mean,
did that
lots
for.
of lots of stuff. I did that
Yeah.
for quite a period of years. Yeah, my first serious project was Generic Grass, which
Oh,
was a bluegrass band,
right, right. Sure, I've heard of
but
them.
a really good bluegrass band at the time. They had a couple of players that were really great.
Yeah.
Anyway, I did that. I did a bunch of one-off kind of stuff. I did a lot of little recording jobs for various people, recorded demos for some solo artists and that kind of thing. Now the Shrugs was at the time like a truly unique band
Sure.
because they were all just super talented guys who kind of rubbed each other the wrong way. So it was very similar to the Dogs, the
Yeah.
sort of dynamics within the Shrugs. When I recorded the Shrugs, we recorded the tracks in an afternoon. Overdubs took maybe another couple of days on and off afterwards. Took a whole year to get Eddie and Tony to agree on a final mix.
Oh, wow.
I mean, it was just they would come up. Oh, I loved it. The clock was running. Eddie would
Oh,
come
sure.
over, run up some
Right.
time,
Right.
undoing what Bill did the last week. So finally, it's like Bill Cotter put his foot down and he was like, "Hey, this is just
This is
costing us
done.
too much money.
Yeah.
We got to agree on something. Let Tom do his job, and that will be the." And I tell you, of anything in the music realm that I've ever done, that I'm very proud of that record. I think that
Oh, cool.
is, it's like a power pop record.
Yeah. What are you doing these days? You hinted that you're playing with Bruce a little bit. Are you playing any music these days?
Uh,
You're
I
still a
ha-
young guy.
I have oh God, yes. I play every Wednesday at the Villa Tavern in Cambridge Springs in a kind of a pickup band with some of the guys from with Sam and
So
Frank
you
of
play with Jack
Sam and
Cermak
Frank.
and
Jack doesn't come out
not
anymore.
anymore. I know
Now
he
that
used to do
Jack,
that. Yeah,
Jack has dad
he does.
responsibilities now,
That's right.
lots of them. So
Yes.
Jack really can't do that
Right.
anymore. Sam, Frank, lately a drummer, Jim Popesky, who's an old Erie guy from way back,
Okay.
who's been living in Memphis for quite a few years. It's like an open mic with a house
I
band.
was going to say that's been going on for
10
years.
years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Right.
So I become a part of that. I'm a keyboard player
Oh,
in
okay.
that.
All right.
And I kind of decided I played keyboard on the side all the time, and I
Okay.
played keyboard on some dog songs. We always had a keyboard set up on stage. Sam played some, I
Right.
played some. We had a lot of, we had a lot of different stuff we did there. So, the WXCS thing, I joined because there's never a keyboard player. That's what I discovered when I moved back to Erie the last time.
Not a lot of
You go to
keyboard.
open stage things, there's like 25 guitar players,
Right. Right.
all turned up to 10 and all playing at the same time. But there's rarely a keyboard
It's a good
player.
point. Yeah.
So,
Right.
I and my keyboard chops have improved a lot since then.
Cool. Yeah.
And
And
I wanted to very quickly come back to when I finished with the bands.
yeah.
Uh, I also have this Monday night. Started out as a Monday night jam session. It's the Monday Night Misfits,
Okay.
and it is me, Ray Wesolowski, who plays banjo and does a
Harmonica.
lot of
Or
open mic.
yeah.
It does a lot of open mics. Julia Hamilton, who's a really good, both in the jazz kind of vein and the folk country kind of vein, really good singer.
Okay.
Don Dabrowski playing lap steel,
Nice.
and Dave Schroeder of PACA as the drummer,
Okay.
and we practice at
At
PACA
PACA.
because Dave, but now that was never really supposed to be an actual band. But that has gotten to a point where we've gotten pretty good. We're looking for gigs now
Cool.
as a band. And then a while back, Lisa Rhodes, who's from Erie, Lisa Rhodes was in a band, Dogtooth Violet,
Okay.
with Mike Graham of Graham's Used Records
Sure.
and Tom Arndt, the bass
Yep.
player.
You're playing with her too.
So Lisa
Sure.
and I have a duo. And Lisa is a really great singer with a lot of presence.
What kind of stuff are you playing?
Um, I'm playing electric guitar
Okay.
because what I've discovered, and I wish more of the duos around here would do it. Like you can be quieter with electric guitar than you can with acoustic. You really can. I mean,
Okay.
you could be. I can go from very quiet, delicate finger pick kind of style to very loud, almost punk rock.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's what we're trying to explore. The songs with Lisa are, I would say, a little bit campy,
Are they originals?
garage punk kind of songs. A few
Okay.
originals. Mostly we're doing covers, but we're doing like very interesting. We're taking the cover very far away
Sure.
from the
Right.
song.
What?
So anyway, I mean, we're playing like we're just starting to get out.
Where? What's the name?
Bill's Garage.
Bill's Garage. All right. Not Joe's Garage. Bill's
Bill's
Garage.
Garage.
Excellent. And you're
Well, because we practiced it. Now we're branching out into other garages. But
okay.
Bill Nagy offered us the use of his garage to practice over the
Perfect.
summer
The name writes
while
itself.
we were getting it together, and we couldn't figure out any other name, and it was like, how about Bill's Garage?
All right.
So we're going to be playing. We're not trying to do more than about an hour worth of material.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're targeting ourselves at the opening band
Sure.
market,
Sure.
like because it's a duo, but we can be as loud as a rock band.
Right. Right.
I mean, no drums, just simply guitar. And I'm starting to use a looper so I can
Sure.
kind of fill in the guitar parts
Fills
a
it up.
little bit.
You could play at PACA, and
She's playing percussion a
yeah.
little bit. Um,
You know,
yeah,
maybe that. I mean, there's lots of.
See, I want to play at the Warner Theater.
Sure.
That's my thing immediately. I want to do that. And also, the thing I've been doing steadily since my film, we haven't even talked about those.
Right.
I made a film, Troubadour Blues,
Right.
in the early 2000s
Yep.
that took me all over the country shooting. I have subsequently been working on a film, Don't Give Up Your Day Job, about musicians and working musicians.
Right. Right.
That's also taken me all over the country that I'm about to sit down and edit.
Yeah.
So, I've been doing that. But anyway, during the pandemic, I have over the years gotten friendly with Norman
Right.
Nardini,
I wanted to mention this.
and
Yeah.
well, yeah, because there's this amazing resource
Yeah,
out
and
there.
people in town know Norman Nardini,
Uh,
because he came up here so much and he's
yeah,
still
I mean,
around and he's
hey,
still
he
full of
just
energy.
blew the roof off the Blues and Jazz
Oh, did he
Festival.
play down there?
He
Oh, okay,
sat
cool.
in with, well, he just sat in for one song with one of the headliners,
How
one
did
of the blues headliners, and man, he rocked. He
and so
was,
you've done 14 episodes with him. You just
oh
ended
no,
in more?
we've done a total of
Oh,
32
okay.
2-hour shows.
Okay.
At first, it was just Norman by himself, and it was called Alone.
Okay.
And then it was called the Norman Nardini Show, and he started bringing on some of his friends
Yep.
as guests. And what happened is people were so starved for live entertainment
Right.
that we were doing five, six, $700 in tips
Oh, wow. That's great.
per show. We
Yeah.
couldn't have made that much money going out and playing
Right,
during
right.
the pandemic. Nobody would have come out.
And
So anyway, Norman has a real talent for that medium, just
sure.
that improvised comedy. I mean, he's had years of entertaining people on stage.
I'll include a link to it because people need to
Yeah.
check
Well,
these
just
out too. They're
yeah,
super
just
cool. Your
include a
YouTube
link. They're all
page.
on they're
Right.
all on my YouTube
Yeah.
channel, and I'm starting to go through those, kind of my get warmed up to the big documentary
Oh, gotcha.
project right now.
Right.
I've been going through those and pulling out. I'm going to put out a best of Norman Nardini show
Cool.
DVD. Also, I'm working with Norman. Norman has two unreleased live recordings from the 70s, 80s,
Wow.
and he has the Eaten Alive album, which was done as a one off vinyl. There was never a CD of that. So he's got these 3 live records that he's attempting to release and capitalize on. Norman is like a phenomenal entertainer. Mo Troop
Yeah.
said, posted this to me, and I said, "Hey, can I use that?" Mo Troop said that Norman Nardini is a big time entertainer who never got to be in the big time.
That's great. Yeah. Yeah.
And it's really true. Norman's an old guy. He's tremendously popular in Pittsburgh.
Yep.
He can play 2 or 3 times a week in Pittsburgh till he drops dead.
Yeah.
And people will keep coming.
Right.
The trouble with that nationally, let's say try to promote Norman in Boston. Well, they got a guy, Willie Alexander, in Boston, who's the same kind of
Sure.
guy.
Right. Every place has.
He's a very talented, entertaining guy. Everybody much beloved locally, but nobody outside has ever heard of him. And it's very difficult to promote somebody who never made it big.
Yeah.
But I'm trying to, and I'm trying to kind of use some of my contacts that I made for that, to that end.
Well, I'm glad that we got to talk about you and your 3 knucklehead buddies and the dogs and everything else. And I super appreciate you being here today. Everybody out there knows who you are, and they can go see you in some of these other projects, hopefully soon. So go out and see him. I appreciate you being here on the podcast today. It was a lot of fun, and thanks again.
Thank you.
All right, man.
Hey, that's it for this episode. I want to remind you to check out Jack Stevenson's 2-Man Happy Hour podcast for information on who's playing where and when today in Erie. You can find that at 2manhappyhour.com. Also, super big thank you to the JPT Foundation, which is a sponsor. They not only have a bingo hall on West 38th Street that has bingo 4 days a week, the giant hall can be rented out for various functions, and they have all the equipment for a casino night, so if you want to do that, they have that also. Check them out at jptfoundation.com. And finally, give a listen to Chris and Julie Moore's Next to You radio program, where they interview various local folks. You can find it at WQLN, NPR 91.3 FM, and live streaming. Until next time, I'm Chip Shell. Thanks for listening to the Erie Music History Podcast. Hey, if you're still there, here's my random free plug for a local business that I like. If you've ever come to see my band, Rankin and Shell, you know that we play a lot at the Colony Pub. Well, not only do we like to play there, but we really do love their food there. My wife and I are especially fond of their steak tips and rice, so check them out. The quesadillas, by the way, are also awesome. I get them after most of my gigs. Okay, see ya.